Ивета, нас слышно, да?
Да-да-да, хорошо слышно.
Ивета.
Да-да-да, я тут. Меня слышно? Hello.
Всех хорошо слышно.
Прокул, вас слышно, единственное, у вас камера зеркально отображает в Zoom.
Это нас слышно?
Да.
Ивета.
Да-да-да, слышно. А меня слышно?
Ивета, do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Звук. Звук зума здесь не выходит. Звук зума теперь не будет выходить. Теперь через наушники. Я же не буду слышать, да? Значит, мне еще один нужен, потому что я не буду слышать. Ивета, да, зал нами будет, а наушник будет. Не, уже, там пока наушник. Потому что сейчас один онлайн набирает тоже есть, надежно будет слышно. За пределом. Да.
Слышно, да?
Да, здесь слышно не будет. Они подключили.
Вчера, помните как?
Вчера было, они сейчас на следующий через наушники.
Они будут каждый раз.
Не, она начнет, дальше я сам буду модерировать.
Все.
Да, главный вопрос, чтобы я не буду слушать теперь наушники, еще один вопрос. Да,
Так.
чтобы я тоже слышал.
Достаточно видите информацию, уберите.
Да.
Давайте положим.
Iveta, do you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Yes, good. So we're gonna be starting. So you first. Please.
Perfect.
Iveta, please, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dilvarsho. Good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for participation in this important event. I would like to say that it's very important for Tajikistan to present the revised NDC. As we know, the most vulnerable people bear the brunt of climate change impacts, yet contribute the least to the crisis. An array of familiar and unfamiliar risks deriving from vulnerabilities, shocks, and stresses are jeopardizing food systems and forcing millions to face hunger and acute food insecurity. Global crises such as COVID-19, the climate emergency, pollution, biodiversity loss, and conflicts are aggravating food insecurity and posing an existential threat to both humans and ecosystems alike. That is why it's very important in such documents like NDC or other provisions under Paris Agreement to signal to the community how the country can commit and what kind of needs are important to adapt to climate change. In this regard, I will give floor to our guests today. to represent the welcoming speech and then to present the revised NDC. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Iveta. So, dear colleagues, as Iveta has mentioned, the overall understanding of NDC, the overall understanding of the NDC of Tajikistan and the issues that have been done through the works over in Tajikistan. And we're going to be starting through our agenda now. For the first opening and welcoming speech, we're going to be inviting the chairman of the Committee of Environmental Protection and the Government of the Republic of Tajikistan, Mr. Bahadur Sheralizoda. Please, the floor is yours. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Distinguished participants, gentlemen, it's an honor for me to welcome all of you to this side event to discuss the implementation and financing of the long-term NDC measures in order to achieve the common agreed goal of the Paris Agreement. It's worth to mention that the Republic of Tajikistan is a lower middle income country, which on the one hand has one of the lowest GHG emissions, and on the other hand is highly vulnerable to climate change impacts. Coping with climate change is a challenge for a landlocked mountainous developing country such as the Republic of Tajikistan. Affected by extreme events and dependent on natural resources, the country is highly vulnerable to climate variability and climate change impacts. Taking into account that climate change may intensify existing problems and pose additional risks to the achievement of national development priorities, the Republic of Tajikistan is aimed at to address the economic and social impacts of climate change in a sustainable way and initiate transformational change in different economic sectors. The enhancement of adaptive capacity of communities and different economic sectors by the building of climate resilience across country is one of the essential pillars of the country. In this regard, the government of Tajikistan, in order to address the development priorities, requires close cooperation with international and national stakeholders. Most of developing countries, including Tajikistan, face challenges on the path to sustainable development by lack of financial resources, knowledge, skills, technologies, and institutional mechanisms. Given the ambitious goals, most of the countries emphasize the needs for increased international support to implement their nationally determined contributions and achieve sustainable development goals by 2030. I would also like to note the contribution of international development partners represented by the NDC partnership for their support and enhancement of Tajikistan's nationally determined contribution. The Tajikistan's NDC revision process involved 5 key sectors identified as priority sectors for our country, and they comprise the following. It's agricultural sector, energy, forestry and biodiversity, industry and construction, and transport and infrastructure. The unconditional contribution of reducing greenhouse gas emissions in Tajikistan is not to exceed 60 to 70% of the greenhouse gas emissions as of 1990 annual basis, which is the reference here, and the target to be achieved by 2030. The conditional contribution is subject to significant international funding and technology transfer, is not to exceed 50 to 60% of greenhouse gas emissions as of 1990 by the year of 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, the updated information on Tajikistan's NDC consists of mitigation contributions to be implemented with its own efforts and conditional contributions that rely on adequate international support, namely financial and technical support, technology transfer, as well as capacity building. The whole support package will accelerate the mitigation efforts and adaptation measures in the Republic of Tajikistan. Distinguished delegates, Tajikistan's vision is to realize its ambition with the sustainable development perspective, review its national goals through the sectoral level, and develop sectoral NDC roadmaps and long-term climate strategies that prioritize a range of climate actions. And finally, I would like to reaffirm the intention of the Republic of Tajikistan to strengthen cooperation with international development partners in delivering the priorities set out in the NDC by mobilizing support. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Of course, the efforts of Tajikistan and submission of the NDC up to the UNFCCC COP26 is one of the huge steps that Tajikistan has been made so far. And there is many other kind of initiatives and works have to be done toward the getting or achieving the overall targets that are under the NDC of Tajikistan has been planned so far. And step by step and within all these issues, we do hope that we're going to be achieving all these. And the next welcoming speech is Mr. Romeo Bertolini, Deputy Country Engagement Director, NDC Partnership. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and let me get this off. Thank you very much, and it's great to be here. Thanks also for the invitation. Dear Mr. Chairman, Shirley Zoda, dear colleagues, partners, Iveta, thanks for the introductory remarks. Thank you for inviting us, the NDC Partnership, to open the side event and share the support mobilized for Tajikistan through the Climate Action Enhancement Package. My colleague Amanda will be speaking to this later to you and go a little bit more into the detail to explain what has been done and how the partners have been working together. I would also like to congratulate Tajikistan to submit their updated NDC on the 12th of October. We just spoke about it, a heavy lift, which was made possible, of course, by the commitment of the government of Tajikistan, by the commission, the cross-sectoral commission of environment, and then also by the support of members of the NDC partnership, mentioning especially FAO, GIZ, the World Bank, the European Commission, and UNDP. Both and all of them have supported the enhancement of the GHG inventory, the analysis and the coordination contribution to the updated NDC. The work in Tajikistan stands true for the NDC partnership that guides the principle that effective coordination can accelerate results and enhance collective impact of invested resources. Our tagline, our slogan, if you like, is "Together we can achieve more." And I think that's exactly what we have been showcasing in the work of the past years as an international coalition, but also in the cooperation with you in Tajikistan. The means used to achieve the updated NDCs brought together, and we acknowledge the dedication of those involved. However, now we need to look into implementation, and as they say here, there's a decade of climate action in front of us and ahead of us. The discussion today on financial and technological needs capacity building and knowledge sharing is ever more pertinent for Tajikistan to achieve the targets set in the updated NDCs. At the NDC partnership, really we stand committed to mobilize the resources and we follow the guidance of the government. And therefore, it's really great once again to have made this great effort and work with you through this commitment and the updated NDCs. Who are we now, the NDC partnership? For those who are probably not so aware, we consider ourselves an international coalition for climate action. our membership has now grown to almost 200 members, 116 countries, 45 international institutions, almost 40 associated members that really work together for the future of the planet in order to also deploy the global work and the resources that are available to assist countries existing and accelerating and making the existing NDCs real, but also to enhance the NDCs and the climate commitments, not as technical concepts, but as underlying principles for the national planning and the international support coming together. We look forward to continue to work closely with you and your colleagues also in the country, but also in Central Asia and neighboring countries through our partners for greater and more ambitious climate action. With that, thank you very much. And once again, thanks a lot for the support.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bertolini. Indeed, the overall support from the NDC partnership is really was on time, not just for Tajikistan, but for the overall region, where we all gathered here, like 5 countries in one region with one voice and going on forward here. Thank you very much. And the next presenter and welcoming speech is going to be from the FAO resident representative in Tajikistan, Mr. Oleg Uchgildiv. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, dear chairman, dear guests, dear colleagues. First of all, let me thank you for inviting me for welcoming speech.
Mr. Uchgildiv, please.
Yes. Do you hear me? Hello, do you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much, dear chairman, dear guests, dear colleagues, for inviting me for the welcoming speech.
Please excuse us for some technical problems. So, yes. Yeah, so for now, we're going to be asking Mr. Pa Osman Jaju, GCF Director in the Country Programming Division, for the welcoming speech, and afterwards, we're going to be shifting to Mr. Oleg Uchgildiv. Please, Mr. Jaju, the floor is yours.
Hello. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you. And apologies, I had a different schedule on my calendar. Thank you very much for this invitation to provide an opening remark on this very important event. On behalf of the GCF, I would like to express appreciation to the government of Pakistan and our partners for initiating this timely discussion on financial knowledge, technology, and capacity needs to support the implementation of completed NDCs. We welcome efforts of countries to not only update but also enhance their NDCs. And our common task is to ensure that these are ambitious and successfully implemented despite the current COVID challenges that we are all facing. And we are here to render our continued support to all of you. As you are aware, we were established in 2010 as the financial operating entity of the financial mechanism of the convention to support paradigm shifting projects and programs in all developing countries to not only reduce emissions, but also build their resilience towards livelihood communities and also the business lines within your respective NDCs. And we have series of instruments that would support you go through this journey. And with the developing countries, particularly what the GCF has been doing is supporting readiness that is tailor-made for strengthening not only the institutions, but also the human and regulatory frameworks that would be identified with a very transformative instrument or investments that would lead towards the implementation of your NDCs. Now, as of October this year, we have provided almost 500 readiness projects to all developing countries that are valued at $306 million US. And this is being supported to 140 countries. Now, we do also have a project preparation facility that supports countries in developing funding proposals, particularly with respect to technical studies and feasibility studies into bankable pipeline projects. And each country can access a cap of almost $1.5 million US towards preparations of projects through this facility. Now, coming closer to Tajikistan, we had a very successful start, and we have a portfolio of readiness projects of $4 million US that is supporting Pakistan, and we also have projects valued at $85 million US in climate change investments in both mitigation and adaptation. And we are also supporting the development of a national adaptation plan for Tajikistan, through which they can also have climate investments in adaptation. Now, in addition to that, we are supporting Pakistan to develop a country program. And this country program would align the priorities in not only enhancing the capacities of the relevant institutions, but also building an investment program, pipeline of projects that we can further support in the implementation in the form of projects. Now, we are very happy that you have this very insightful discussion today, and we are ready to go along with you in identifying your urgent needs, your priorities, to really implement your NDCs. And we have a team that is dedicated to you. We have a regional team that is supporting you. And please don't hesitate to come to us anytime you need further assistance and further support to ensure that your ambitious goal of climate action through the NDC is fully supported by the GCF towards the realization of your ultimate objectives. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Pausman Jarju, for overall support and the readiness of the GCF to work not just in a kind of national levels, but also in a regional level to overcome with all the ambitious targets to be achieved in the region. The next speaker and welcoming remarks are going to be from the FAO resident representative in Tajikistan, Mr. Oleg Guchkeldiv. Please, Mr. Guchkeldiv, the floor is yours. Your mic is off, Mr. Guchkeldiv. You are muted. You're muted, Mr. Guchkeldiv.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello. Do you hear me? Thank you very much. Dear Mr. Chairman, dear colleagues, dear guests, thank you very much for giving me opportunity to speak on behalf of FAO Tajikistan office on this very high-level event. First of all, let me, it is needless to say that the dependence on agricultural sector is really high in the country, with almost the recent census confirmed that almost three-fourths of the population lives in rural areas, and most of the vulnerable people like women are involved in agricultural activities, which produces almost 20% of GDP. Therefore, high dependence on agriculture also means for us the dependence on the climate change issues, on changes on the climate. Climate change is becoming a reality for us in the country here. I'm here for 3 years, and I can really feel now that climate change impacts are moving from the discussions into the field. And the frequency of extreme events, frequency of emergency situations, reality now. We're working more on dealing with the floods, mud floods, with a high impact on the agricultural production, on the food production in the country. Droughts also are affecting the country in terms of the food security. There is a continuous effect on the production from the climate effects. And everything of this is challenged with the COVID-19 impacts, of course, on the social economic well-being. Needless to say, also the importance of the country at the regional level and the national determined contributions developed and correctly implemented might have a positive effect and into the countries around Tajikistan as well. I would like to thank the NDC partnership for accepting FAO to lead and coordinate, among other partners, the great work on NDC development. It was very interesting exercise. It was quite a difficult process where we had to review also targets, look at more carefully at the methodology. But let me also outline the great work and teamwork of all international partners which were involved on the subsectoral studies, on the accepting all the challenges and changes, providing the information and additional work which require to follow the UNFCCC methodology. And of course, as a result of it, we received targets, but also the proposal for mitigation and adaptation measures. And this partnership, I hope, will stay also with the implementation and achievement of NDC in the future. As FAO, we are ready to work on achieving it together, as Mr. Romeo Bertolini said, and also we are ready to work to make adaptation and mitigation less impactful for farmers and food security for the country. I wish you a great presentation and thank you very much.
For this, we are finalizing the first session of the side event. So thank you very much for the speakers and for the panelists for your time and for visiting our side event, NDC Tajikistan. So we're gonna be shifting. Thank you very much. So. For now, we're gonna be shifting to the second session of our side event. We're gonna be asking our speakers and panelists to come to here. It's gonna be Amanda Makki, Muzaffar Shodmonov, and Kate Hughes. Please. Thank you very much. The second session of our side event is overall about Tajikistan updated NDC regarding main aspects and needs for financing, technologies, capacity building, and international expertise. And the first presentation under our side event is going to be from the NDC, from the head of the CAIP, Amanda Makki, on NDC Partnership Climate Action Enhancement Package. Please, Amanda Makki, the floor is yours.
This one, yeah. All right, so while the slides are being pulled up, let me first say thank you so much for inviting me today. As was introduced, I am the head of our Climate Action Enhancement Package, and this is the support program through which the NDC partnership has been supporting countries to update and enhance their NDCs as part of the 2020 process. And this is the support mechanism through which we supported Tajikistan. I'm going to share a little bit of insights into some of the trends we're seeing through CAP, and then talk a little bit specifically about the support that's been provided in the country. So next slide, please. So in total, through the CAP process, we have been supporting 67 countries globally with the support of 46 partners. And we've heard from some of them already, and I'll talk a little bit more about it, especially the role that FAO has played in this process. But what we're seeing from the countries that have already submitted their NDCs, which is 54 of those 67, is that there's a huge amount of improvement. So we're seeing ambition go up, but the NDC documents themselves are a lot higher quality, and I'll get into in a moment why that's so important. And also the process that has gone into it has been strengthened considerably, which is helping to lay the groundwork for that ambition to actually be implemented. So next slide, please. And I'm going to start, next slide. I'm going to start by talking about ambition specifically. And really what we're seeing is that across all of these countries that have submitted so far, all of the CAP countries, they've all raised their ambition, either their mitigation or adaptation ambition. We're seeing that in a number of different ways, either by expanding the sectoral coverage of the NDC, by expanding the actual target itself, or expanding the scope of the NDC to include more gases. So there's a wide range of how countries are approaching the raising of ambition. Next slide, please. We're also seeing a shift in the types of targets that countries are putting forward. And we're seeing more and more quantitative targets, which countries can follow with better data behind them. When we look at 2015, of these 54 countries that I'm diving into, 41 of them, just over 75%, had a quantitative target. And now we only have one country that is not having a quantitative target. So this is a really big shift in countries setting that target and setting the accountability mechanism. Next slide, please. The other big shift that we're seeing is in terms of the targets themselves and what countries are committing to with national resources versus what they're asking for international resources. And we're seeing a big shift towards national resources being dedicated towards this process. So in 2015, again, we only had 2 of these NDCs that were fully unconditional, and this time we have 6. Looking at the other side, we had 22 NDCs that were fully conditional on international support, and that's dropped to 13. And so this is a really promising shift, signaling strong commitment towards the implementation of the Paris goals. Next slide, please. And next slide. So I'll talk a little bit about quality as well. So there's a number of different ways that we're seeing countries enhance and strengthen the quality of their NDC documents. So either information gathering and assessment, strengthen modeling that goes behind the targets, but we're also seeing a lot of work that's taking place on implementation plans, financing strategies, long-term plans. So laying the groundwork to be able to implement the NDC quickly. Next slide, please. Another shift that we're seeing is in terms of the costing. And so a number of countries are now coming forward with more detailed costing of what it will take to actually finance those NDC targets. And so we have it broken down by region here. You can see in the Asia, Eastern Europe, and Pacific region, it's about a 50-50 split in terms of countries that have costed. We have, of these 54 countries, 35 have costed their NDCs, and we've calculated that at about $2.1 trillion. If we look specifically at the case of Tajikistan, the NDC costing, if we put that in terms of GDP, comes out to 129%. So this is huge. That's the implementation of the entire NDC. If we divide that over the 10 years, about 12.9% of GDP per year. So it's a big number. It's not an insurmountable number. And I think the really important thing to keep in mind is that in order to ensure we can meet that target, it's important that the work starts now, because every year that that's delayed, that cost is going to be heavier and heavier for the country to bear. And this is why it's so important for countries to be developing their implementation plan and financing plan hand in hand with the NDC, which is something that we've seen in Tajikistan. Next slide, please. And next slide. So just lastly, on these general trends, quickly on the process, we're seeing a number of improvements in terms of the standards that are being applied to the NDC itself, the process for who's been engaged in the consultations, gender considerations, youth considerations as well. Next slide, please. So I want to spend just the last few minutes talking about Tajikistan and the support that was provided through CAP. And so in total, we supported 11 activities ranging around the actual NDC update itself, all the way to the implementation planning. And this brought together 5 of our implementing partners. This was FAO, the European Commission, GIZ, the World Bank, and UNDP. And in total, the funds that these partners and the NDC partnership have brought to this specific process is just over $1 million US. Next slide, please. We heard earlier in terms of the priority sectors in the NDC, and here we've broken it down in terms of the support that was provided. And you can see there's a great deal of variety, which really reflects what the partners were able to bring to the table. And I'll get to that in just a moment. But we have some partners working on industry, some partners bringing their expertise on agriculture, others bringing expertise on energy. So next slide, please. So really quickly, just in terms of the overview of the support that was provided, and I'm actually going to start with FAO at the bottom of the screen here, because I think this is one of the most critical pieces of the puzzle. And FAO provided the overall coordination support. So bringing together all of the different pieces from the implementing partners, compiling the mitigation and adaptation targets, doing the stock taking on the MRV, and really defining the climate finance needs. And this is in addition to some of the support, specific support they provided on AFOLU. GIZ, for instance, brought expertise on agriculture, climate impact assessment. The World Bank brought in their expertise on landscape restoration, on forestry. Next slide, please. And then our 2 last partners, the European Commission, focused really on the energy elements, whereas UNDP looked into industry, construction, transport, and is also developing the NDC implementation plan that I mentioned. And so this is the value of the partnership, is drawing together these implementing partners and enabling the country to tap into that specialized expertise to really enhance their support and enhance the implementation as well. Next slide, please. So I think just in conclusion, 2 points I wanted to really briefly mention is that now that the NDC has been submitted, attention is quickly shifting to the implementation. And this is why the implementation plan is so critical, to hit the ground running, to ensure that we have time to turn that climate ambition into reality. And it's clear that a great deal of political capital has been invested in this process, and in order to increase the NDC ambition itself of the document. And so it's really important that the finance follows to really enable that implementation. And I'll leave it at that, and just thank you again for having us at the event today.
Thank you very much, Ms. Amanda McKee. All the questions and answers are going to be after the session. So after we're going to be hearing all 3 speakers. So the next speaker is Muzaffar Shodmonov, Committee of Environment Protection under the Government of the Republic of Tajikistan, on the presentation about updated NDC, main aspects and needs for financing, technologies, and capacity building. Please, Mr. Shodmonov, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be with you to present Tajikistan's NDC for this side event. And let me start with the Tajikistan national context. Please, next slide. So Tajikistan is a landlocked mountainous country. It's located in the southeastern part of the Central Asia, with a population about 9.5 million and a surface of 142.6 thousand square kilometers. Elevations range in Tajikistan starts from the 300 meters up to 7,495 meters. And the mountains occupy about 93% of the country. Forests in Tajikistan only take up 3% of the territory of the country, where it has also the protected areas. About 22% of the territory is protected areas. The share of Tajikistan's water resources in region is more than 60%, and big glaciation it's situated in Tajikistan. The total area of glaciers in Tajikistan are about above the 8,000 square kilometers, with the total volume of 567 cubic kilometers. The main source of energy in Tajikistan is hydropower. The total potential of the hydropower is about 527 billion kilowatt hour per year. Only 4 to 5% of this potential is used. And most of the population, it's about 70% of populations are living in the rural area, with the total GDP of Tajikistan in, let's say, in 2020, it was $8.7 billion. Per capita GDP is about 840. And Tajikistan is a small country among the Central Asian region and has a low emission. Its share to the Central Asian region is about like 3%, and the total emissions which were estimated according to the first biennial update report in 2014, it was 9.1 million ton CO2 equivalent, where the per capita estimated as a 1 ton CO2 equivalent. Totally, the share of Tajikistan in a global emission is very, very small. And the Tajikistan is affected by extreme events and a very vulnerable country to climate change impacts due to its high vulnerability to climate variability and climate change impacts. Some of the sectors are most of the sectors are very sensitive and increases the country's vulnerability to climate change. Next slide, please. Here we have the emission trend of Tajikistan starting from the baseline, base year, 1990 till 2016. So all of the inventory data set was recalculated in cooperation with the international partners and NDC partnership team. The methodology used is 2006 IPCC methodology with using the global warming potentials. So all the data sets were recalculated. Next slide, please. Here we have the emission of the Republic of Tajikistan in the base year 1990 expressed as a percentage. So as you see, the emission per sector shows that in 1990, the 60% of the overall GNG emissions of the country comes from the energy sector, followed by the agriculture and the industrial processes with 9%, and followed by the waste and LULUCF, which has the minor weight in the overall GHG emissions of the country. Next slide, please. Uh, uh, According to the Tajikistan first biennial report in 2014, we see the change. The emission from the energy sector was decreased in a half, where we see the increase in the agriculture sector with waste and industrial process. Next slide, please. So after the estimation and assessment of the inventory and the base year estimates were increased to 35.5 million ton of CO2 equivalent, which is estimated for the base year. So the time frame of Tajikistan's NDC starting from 2021 till 2030. Gases covered, this is the greenhouse gases not controlled by the Montreal Protocol. We have here 3 gases, carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. So if we divide by the sectors, the base year, as you see in the chart and here, so the energy sector has a huge amount of emissions. It's about like 21.3 million megatons CO2 equivalent. And also we have the sinks from the forestry and other land use. It's about 2 millions. All this estimation, as I said, was done according to the IPCC methodology, 2006. Next slide, please. Next slide. So the information and sources of data which were used in Tajikistan's NDC, there was the key strategic documents which were used for the development of the Tajikistan's NDC. It's starting with the National Development Strategy of the Republic of Tajikistan till 2030, and the Midterm Development Program of the Republic of Tajikistan for the period of 21 to 2025. And then it comes with the other documents like National Strategy of the Republic of Tajikistan on Disaster Risk Reduction and National Strategy for Adaptation on Climate Change. These documents were used for the compiling of NDC and defining the scenarios for the future emission. Next slide, please. So as I said, the deadlines for the fulfilling of the Tajikistan's NDC starting from the 2021 till December 23. The Tajikistan, of course, will be monitoring its commitments through the biennial basis with the estimation of GHG emissions and sinks through the country's preparation of national communications, biennial update reports, and in the future, biennial transparency reports, which will need to be submitted to the UNFCCC. Tajikistan set a single year target for 2030. Next slide, please. Here we see the estimation for our emission projection scenarios. We used some macroeconomic and other parameters for formulating the baseline and mitigation scenarios. We use the GDP, sectoral GDP growth and percentage share contribution to the GDP and the growth of the population in the future. Next slide, please. According to all these scenarios, we have these charts with the baseline and unconditional and conditional for future projection till 2030. Next slide, please. Here we had some comparison analysis made for The first NDC submitted in 2017 with the mitigation targets according to two targets, unconditional and conditional. As you see, like much difference is shown in the second NDC, more ambitious, with the conditional target 15 to 16 emissions, and the unconditional target to 16 and 17. Next slide, please. So also in NDC of Tajikistan, we reviewed all the adaptation priorities through the national strategies, policies and plans, sectorial plans and the strategies. And we defined that the National Development Strategy of the Republic of Tajikistan, which is adopted in 2016, outlines the general direction of economic development with the implementing measures that can help to reduce the impact of climate change, which includes the use of non-traditional renewable energy sources, the minimization of the negative impact of the transport on the environment and human health, fostering the development of green employment, expanding the environmental entrepreneurship and the environmental services market. As for the second key document, which were also included in the NDC of Tajikistan, is a national strategy for adaptation. This strategy summarized the information needed to identify the risks, threats, and adaptive measures related to climate change. So the government of Republic of Tajikistan prioritized most sensitive sectors to climate change, which has the development priorities. These are the energy, water resources, transport, and agriculture. In the medium-term development program of the Republic of Tajikistan for the years of 2021 and 2025, which was adopted in 2021, a special section is devoted to environmental protection, climate change, and natural disasters, with link to the national strategy for adaptation. And of course, the other sectorial programs and plans were used in the development of the NDC of Tajikistan. Next slide, please. So we here see the some sectors identified where also the both mitigation and adaptation measures are included in NDC of Tajikistan. So some of the mitigations measures are coming from the adaptation action. So as you see, like mitigation co-benefits resulting from adaptation actions are aligned, of course, with the national policies of Republic of Tajikistan. And we defined each sector. Next slide, please. Of course, the NDC also includes the financial part. Here we have, we include some of the estimates for the future for the implementation of the NDC. And where we define that the overall climate finance required by 2030 could represent more than 1 billion USD per year, with sectoral share, where the energy share is 20%, with transport 20%, and followed by water supply and sewage with 10%, and water irrigation for 15%. And biodiversity and natural disaster 15, and agriculture with 20. Of course, the Republic of Tajikistan use own resources for the NDC implementation. However, it strongly relies on the international financial support, both for mitigation and adaptation actions in the future and for the implementation of its NDC. Also, we define the technology transfer in the NDC of Tajikistan. based on the lessons learned from the implementation of projects in the Republic of Tajikistan and from the experience of the other countries, the following mechanism for introducing the new technologies can be proposed. As you see, it has some points out like bridging existing gaps in the introduction of the new technologies. Of course, after that, with the monitoring and evaluation of these new technologies and the monitoring of the financing mechanism, giving some incentive and technology advancements and sectoral coverage and knowledge sharing. And the third component is capacity building that needed for Tajikistan in the implementation of the NDC and for the monitoring of the future emission and assessment of the mitigation impacts to the implementation of the NDC and the reducing for future GHG emissions. Next slide, please. Also, NDC of Tajikistan includes the future transition to the enhanced transparency framework, where the government of Republic of Tajikistan has outlined the following stage in order to improve the current measurement, reporting, and verification system in the country. And in future, as you see, we have a roadmap starting from 2020 to 2030 with 3 stages. In the first stage, starting from 2020 to 25, the main goal is to improve the current methodological and institutional arrangements for the implementation of the MRV system with the involvement of the key sectors of the economy. Then it comes with the second stage, starting from 21 to 2030, where the main goal will be adoption of regulatory framework, which aims to improve the MRV system to monitor the emissions. And with the third stage, which will start in 2030, it's expected that the obligation to submit reports on GHG emissions will be extended to all entities whose emissions surpass 50,000 tons CO2 per year. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shotmonov. And the last speaker for today, but not the least, Kate Hughes, Senior Climate Change Specialist, Sustainable Development and Climate Change Department, ADB, on NDC Economic Advisory Program for Tajikistan. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good afternoon. My name is Kate Hughes. I'm a Senior Climate Change Specialist at the ADB based in Manila. Thank you very much for having me here. And firstly, just a big congratulations to Tajikistan for the revised NDC and all the work that's gone into it. I'm going to present on ADB's current support, which has just started under the NDC Partnerships Economic Advisory Initiative. We're so pleased to support this work and to see the continuation of the NDC journey in terms of the next step of climate action in Tajikistan. Next slide, please. So the starting point of this work is the context that we find ourselves in now in terms of this dual crisis of climate, but also COVID recovery. Over in the last year, the COVID crisis continues to threaten the Asia and Pacific region with new outbreaks and new variants. And since 2020, 78 million people in Asia and the Pacific have been pushed into extreme poverty. And that number rises even further if you use the $3.20 benchmark. Next slide, please. But at the same time, the climate crisis continues to grow. And although globally we did see a short-term decline in terms of emissions, they've already begun to bounce back as economies reopen. And energy-related CO2 emissions are forecast to grow by nearly 5% this year. and mainly due to the rise of fossil fuel demand in Asia and Pacific. Next slide, please. There's been a strong call to make the COVID recovery green, resilient and inclusive, and to avoid returning to business as usual practices. And despite the enormous challenge that countries are facing in terms of COVID, we can't afford to deprioritize climate action. At the same time, the COVID pandemic has exposed many deeply embedded vulnerabilities in countries. And we see that many of those sectors that are vulnerable are also the same sectors that are vulnerable to climate change. And the issues that have arisen during the pandemic in terms of disproportionate impacts on the poor, food security issues, impacts in certain sectors are similar to impacts that we expect to see as a result of climate change. And so the shape and content of stimulus and recovery decisions, both within a country, but also globally, and how we channel climate finance to support recovery will be crucial to whether we can start to build that critical resilience to climate change and achieve the Paris Agreement goals. But from ADB's perspective, and more importantly, it's not just about recovery, but really seeing this as an opportunity to use the finance that's being mobilized for COVID recovery as a kickstart for the transformation and a kickstart for the implementation of NDCs. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, however, despite all the talk about green recovery and the rhetoric so far, we haven't seen it in action. One set of analysis showed that only 28% of the announced stimulus so far globally has gone to sectors that impact climate change, biodiversity, or local air quality. So there's huge scope to do more. Next slide, please. So ADB is supporting its developing member countries in terms of green recovery, green resilient recovery. And one of the key drivers of our approach is the concept of complementarity and about understanding that economic recovery benefits, objectives and climate objectives are not mutually exclusive, and that green recovery doesn't have to be a cost burden. So it's about bringing together ministries working on different issues, COVID recovery and climate, and working together to get mutual outcomes. You know, there's plenty of examples of climate smart development that can also generate strong economic gains and jobs while also contributing to the NDC. And also stimulus funding that can be directed to projects that generate jobs and support economic stimulus while also addressing vulnerabilities and building resilience to future shocks. Next slide, please. Next slide, thank you. So ADB's president has placed green, resilient and inclusive recovery as a key priority for ADB this year. Next slide, please. You may have seen recently that ADB elevated its ambition to deliver climate financing up to 100 billion from 2019 to 2030. We've also made a commitment to scale up adaptation and resilience funding to at least 9 billion between 2019 and 2024. And a key element of this commitment is to support countries to address the dual challenge of COVID-19 and the climate crisis, recognizing that they're both facing our region. Next slide, please. So we're doing this through all different modalities of support that we have, including knowledge and advisory services, and through channeling finance to support COVID recovery in a way that also supports countries' climate ambitions. Next slide, please. So we're very pleased to be offering this support to Tajikistan in cooperation with the NDC partnership. And as part of the support, we're working with the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade and the Committee of Environmental Protection. And I'll explain the support in a little bit more detail. But the basis of the support and the approach is really to work together to embed economic advisory services into the ministries to enable the government to bring these two agendas together in Tajikistan. Next slide, please. In Tajikistan, as I understand, there was not a really long, hard lockdown like in some other countries, but there was still definite impacts from COVID. Some of the focus of government spending so far, similar to many other countries, is in the health sector as well as social measures for the poor and vulnerable, some social assistance in terms of food security and small businesses, including women-owned businesses. And as I said before, these three areas are also those vulnerable groups and that will be exposed to climate change and disaster risk, and those that are covered in the NDC that we've heard about. And at the same time, as we've heard, Tajikistan has just launched its NDC. You have your National Adaptation Strategy and many of the other documents that were talked about today. So it's really the perfect time to try to integrate those two processes to find mutual benefits. We've heard that Tajikistan requires international support to achieve its NDCs. And we know that there's additional opportunities as a result of COVID. So it's about trying to support Tajikistan to find how to use those opportunities to implement its NDC and other climate ambitions. In Tajikistan's NDC reiterates the importance of reducing vulnerability to climate change and disaster, and highlights both priority adaptation actions and mitigation actions. Next slide, please. Thank you. So it's early in our work. We've just started working with Tajikistan, and we will look to work with the government to identify areas that can support the NDC and channel investment towards NDC implementation. Some examples of this could be improving efficiency in the agriculture sector, which we heard is a key NDC sector today. Things such as improved irrigation, resilient agriculture, crop diversity. So as well as supporting from an adaptation perspective, this could also improve incomes in rural populations with benefits, for example, for cash crops such as cotton. And there you'll get that mutually reinforcing benefit of COVID recovery and NDC. We also heard how the energy sector is a key sector for Tajikistan's NDC. So we can, for example, look for opportunities to improve renewable energy and also look at increasing electricity exports, which we know is a key goal of the government of Tajikistan. Next slide, please. So the work that we will do has three main outcomes. The first one is to look at the economic and financial impacts of COVID and what measures the government has already taken, and then work with the government to understand what the plans are for any further measures to deal with COVID impacts. And then at the same time to look at the NDC implementation plan and try to bring the two together, both in terms of supporting dialogue between ministries and also in terms of analysis of opportunities. The second bit will be to look for financing, so to map sources of financing modalities, understand where there may be additional sources of finance for green recovery, donor preferences for green recovery, and bring those into NDC implementation process for Tajikistan. And the last aspect, but one that's really important to mention, is that it's not just about short-term stimulus. One of the other aspects of the support that we will offer to Tajikistan is to look at longer-term changes to institutional setup and also policy to make sure that investments, green investments, and investments related to the NDC, that the benefits of those are sustained over the long term and that those green benefits don't disappear when the funding is withdrawn. We've started the process of bilateral consultations, and we're preparing to hold a interministerial roundtable. We'll then prepare a technical report and follow up with a series of capacity building workshops. And in early next year, we will hope to come out with a policy brief and also some specific project opportunities that will be ready to take to funders. Next slide, please. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much again for having me.
So thank you very much, Ms. Kate Hughes. Nevertheless, we are kind of running out of time and we have to finalize by this in order to have other side events. But nevertheless, we're going to be opening the floor for the questions, and we're going to be having the time for just a couple of questions. And then we're going to be moving forward to finish the question. Please open the floor for questions, please.
Thank you very much, Dilavarsho, and congratulations for this very interesting event. I would like to make a remark. Here today, we heard about the importance of NDCs for one country, and we heard a lot of interesting keywords. One of these is opportunities. So to implement NDCs, we need multilateralism, we need to cooperate, and we need to work together to make concrete actions come true. So all the sectors which are included in the NDCs of Tajikistan are those sectors which are the core of climate action. If we do not address those sectors, climate action remains at the blah, 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 which we heard recently. So my remark is for a very interesting and prosperous future perspective. And I'm sure that altogether, Central Asia as a region and also as individual countries will manage to move forward and step forward as a real front runner in climate action. And I would like to address a small question to Mr. Muzaffar Shokhmadov, who presented a few minutes ago a very interesting perspective. And with regards to the enhanced transparency framework and the importance of transparency in climate action, I would like to know if you are already considering the fact that the Initiative for Climate Action Transparency is establishing a regional hub in Central Asia under the auspices of CAREC to support countries in improving their climate action transparency, and also in supporting building more concrete and more tailored NDCs even for the near future. Let me congratulate all the other speakers for the very interesting interventions. And one question, very, very short, for Kate Hughes from ADB. You mentioned the energy sector, which is the core for climate action and for addressing really the core of the problems in Tajikistan, but as well also in Central Asia. One specific mention for the building sector, maybe you would like to elaborate more about the building sector. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question.
Apologies, I need to identify myself. My name is Alessandra Fidanza. I'm international expert on climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, for the question on the ETF process in Tajikistan. And I would like to also note that we know about the initiative under the CAREC on the transparency. And of course, now the government takes steps to improve its monitoring and verification process on the national level. And of course, the Committee for Environmental Protection also considers to initiate this process and considers to initiate the capacity building on international transparency project to CBIT in future. So, of course, this project, this process is not so easy. It needs to be gone through the all sectors. It needs to be assessed. It needs some financial resources, technology, and capacity building for the future. So for now, these three stages are identified, and for future, Tajikistan will implement the transition to the enhanced transparency program. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Just a brief comment on the building sector. So that's definitely one of the sectors that we will look at. In many other countries, it's one of the key sectors that have been identified as a dual benefit in terms of COVID recovery and climate change, because it has a high jobs generation potential. For example, energy efficiency projects in the building sector, or even new construction of energy efficient buildings or housing. So that will be one of the key sectors that we will look at as part of our project. And yeah, we would welcome any inputs that you have in terms of opportunities in that sector in Tajikistan. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the last question we're going to be taking, and for others who are attending through the Zoom, colleagues, as you may know, the NDC of Tajikistan is uploaded to the UNFCCC website, and there are emails and other contact details through which you can contact to the Committee for Environment Protection and all other issues to be clarified through these emails, and we can further on cooperate through these contact details. Please, the last question, and we're going to be finalizing.
Hi, everyone. I have been working for Central Asia for more than 20 years. So I really want to ask the questions. It's a wonderful presentation, all of you, and then shows strong country ownership and also shows very excellent collaboration among all the donors. So in Central Asian countries, you have this CAREC, Central Asia Regional Economic Collaboration and Cooperation. How do you want to use that CAREC platform to move this forward? Because it's becoming stronger when all of the five coming together. That is one. Second, with all the donors coming together, so how do you start? And is the round table going to be a very nice idea? Because we have Kate just mentioned, one of the capacity development program will have the round table to start with, to see which donor is going to do what. My name is Xiaohong Yan, ADB Chief Thematic Officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Of course, Tajikistan is cooperating with also the international partners, with the ADB and other multilateral banks, and the program or initiative you are mentioned, of course, will be also considered by the government of Tajikistan for the close cooperation in the future. Thank you.
So thank you very much. As we all know, we kind of have already left our time. In order to finalize and get all the conclusion of this meeting of the side event, I would like our co-moderator, Iveta Zenina, please kind of for the final words and to close today's side event. Please, Iveta, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dilvarsho. But I see a hand here from Olga Boyko. Maybe we can give a last question. I don't know if you see it here or not from Zoom. If you don't mind, maybe additional 5 minutes, and my remarks will be very, very quick.
Iveta, the problem is that we have already run out of time, and the next side event is going to be started. So all the questions we're going to be getting and answering, if there is going to be like emails on the questions and contact persons. Thank you.
Okay, so my apologies. Thank you so much, dear participants of this meeting today. I think we realized after all presentations how it's important to have technical and financial support to enhance the capacity of the country to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. And as we can see that revised NDC of Tajikistan is more ambitious in two terms, in terms of mitigation and in terms of adaptation. But as we know that Tajikistan is the less who contribute, but actually the most who suffers. In this regard, I think that we should continue collaboration of the joint work between the international agencies, donors, and different stakeholders in order to provide security and to improve, to enhance the vulnerability of the society not only in Tajikistan but actually around the world. Thank you so much, and thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Iveta, and I would also like to thank all the participants that have attended our side event online and all. And thanks again, and you have okay. Thank you very much.
you.